Maajid, I know we have to go to questions soon. I want to ask you, though, about grievance and what you hear. And I know there's no single spokesperson or whatever, but and violence. Because I think from the perspective of people who are from the United States who see what's going on in the world, the linkages between wrong linkages between the religion and the grievance that then leads to grievance of U.S. policy, grievance of Iraq, grievance of Afghanistan, whatever it is, to then violence seems to be a straight line. So what do you say to the person who says, look, people can be, annoyed at the U.S. for all sorts of reasons. Why is it only one religion that actually takes that grievance to violence and therefore requires all sorts of, policies by the United States for good or for bad, which then leads to a new level of grievances, which then leads to more violence?
So just for those who aren't familiar with these debates, which in the policy circles, as you're very familiar with, are quite common, the question is whether radicalization is caused by foreign policy grievances, and therefore do we need to change our foreign policy, or is it caused by, say, ideology and something else entirely, and therefore we need to address ideology? And what I say is that human beings react to circumstances differently. We're not all the same. We're social animals. We're not like water. We don't all boil at 100 degrees Celsius, and we don't all freeze at 0. And so, actually, the best way to explain this is it's usually radicalization is due to a combination of factors. There are 4 factors I name in the dialogue with Sam. I talk about grievances having a role in that. If somebody's not angry, they're not going to look for an alternative form of discourse in the first place. So there needs to be an anger there. So there's an element that the grievances play a role. Then there's an identity crisis that comes about. Then there's a charismatic recruiter as a third factor. And the fourth is the role that the ideology plays. But this overly simplistic view that because I'm angry at US foreign policy, it means I'm going to blow something up, is a terrible, terrible racism of low expectations of Muslims. It assumes that a brown young Muslim man, because he can't handle his anger, is just going to blow something up. It's a terrible explanation for what's going on. And actually, Islamists promote it because they want US foreign policy to change. They tell us that all the time. Bin Laden's speeches were all about changing policy towards the Middle East because he wanted to stop the support for Arab regimes so that he could overthrow them, as happened, eventually with the Arab uprising. So it's no surprise Islamists peddle this myth, but it's actually particularly worrying when those on my own political biases, the political center to center left, peddle this myth. Because the problem I have with it is the following. Look, I opposed the invasion of Iraq from a jail cell in Egypt. I've always been opposed to the Bush Jr.-led invasion of Iraq. But what I can't do is say that that's the reason ISIS exists. Of course, there's a contributing factor. We can't say that it's got nothing to do with it. But what I can't say is that that's the reason, that's the cause. Because if you think about it, you follow that logic through, why on earth are ISIS enslaving and raping Yazidi women en masse? What did these poor Yazidis do to anyone, anywhere? Which country did they invade? Or if you go to Afghanistan and look at the Taliban, what is forcing a man to grow a beard at the end of a lash of a whip, or forcing a woman to cover her face and her entire head, or stoning her to death because she's holding hands with the wrong person? What does any of that have to do with any invasion of any country? So there's something a bit more going on here, and it's too simplistic just to put all the blame on foreign policy mistakes. And of course, America, when it intervened in Kosovo to save the lives of Muslims, never got the credit for that. So it's a very simplistic worldview, and it needs to be challenged.
Sam, picking up on Maajid's point, for a well-known atheist, why are you engaging in this conversation? I mean, what is it that would be, let's say I know you're not in politics, but that you would want to see change because of this conversation? Or is it just a good conversation to have?
Well, I think this is the political and ethical problem of our time. I mean, in the largest, most generic sense, I think the contest between good ideas and bad ideas, and the contest between good methodologies at arriving at ideas and bad ones, I think that is the most important distinction to get right, both personally and at the level of societies. And religion at this moment has a monopoly on being able to promulgate bad ideas without the usual collisions with clear-thinking people in the world. There's a taboo against criticizing bad thinking, illogical thinking, false claims to evidence, false claims to knowledge. And I think this has just a destabilizing effect on human cooperation in general, because all we have is a choice between conversation and violence when things really matter. And when you're telling me that there's certain things you know to be true, but the way you know them is not based on any kind of publicly available mode of evidence or reasoning, and these things are not only non-negotiable, they're the most important principles in your life, this is intrinsically divisive. And this worries me across the board with all religion, but with certain religions, their commitments don't matter all that much. You know, the fact that Jains won't kill animals and are rather dogmatic vegetarians, that's not a problem for anyone. And we're not going to see Jain terrorists insofar as they are. And this is why fundamentalism is a term of art and a red herring. The fundamentalism is not a problem if the fundamentals of your religion are totally benign. The crazier you get as a Jain, the less anyone has to worry about you. And that is rather obviously not true of Islam as a religion, nor is it true of many other religions. But Islam has a few variables that we've just touched on briefly that are uniquely problematic. And if I could just touch on this notion of grievance that Maajid just discussed, I think we also have to admit that certain grievances really are just born of religion. They really are just theological. Mm-hmm. And if you push back hard enough on the theology, discredit the theology, that is what you need to do to contain the risk born of these grievances. And so, drawing cartoons about the Prophet Muhammad, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if I took out a piece of paper now and drew a cartoon, a stick figure, and said, "This is Muhammad," it's not implausible to worry that the rest of my life will just be this deranged attempt not to be killed by some religious maniac who thinks I have crossed a line there. There's only one religion on earth today that is doing that to people, and this is not based on U.S. foreign policy. It's not based on anything other than specific religious ideas. And that what liberals have, where liberals have grown confused on this topic, is they think there's some tension between free speech and freedom of religion, whereas there's not. If your free exercise of your religion requires that I follow its precepts, that's not freedom of religion. That is theocracy. Mm. So, and there's nothing I could say on this stage tonight that infringes upon anyone's freedom of religion. There's nothing. People have the political freedom to practice whatever faith they want in this country, and we all, as just sane participants in a civil society, have to recognize that all of these religious ideas have to be on the table to be criticized, mocked, satirized, and that has to be the line between free speech and its erosion. That, for me, is the most crucial line to be very clear about.